Phil Mickelson's private text history subpoenaed to expose widespread cheating allegations. This isn't gossip. It's a federal court order. Golf's most beloved family man just had his personal messages turned into legal evidence. And honestly, the sheer arrogance of it makes me sick. Regular fans save for months to watch these guys play. Yet this six-time major champion was allegedly paying club employees $500 to drive his car around the course for hours. Why? So his wife's phone tracker would show him on the golf course while he was actually out doing God knows what with God knows who. It is the ultimate middle finger to everyone who ever bought a ticket and believed the family man image. But look past the outrage. This isn't just about Phil Mickelson's personal failures. His texts were subpoenaed because of something much bigger, the LIV Golf lawsuit that threatens to tear professional golf apart at the seams. The same messages that expose his private life are now evidence in a case that could determine who actually controls the future of this sport. And he's not the only one whose secrets are about to become public. Personally, I think this is the most damaging scandal golf has ever seen. Do you think Mickelson can ever come back from this? And if you want the full story on every player involved, you're in the right place. Subscribe, because the name you're about to hear next is the one that changes everything. And it's not Phil's. That name is Pat Perez. And to understand why his story matters so much, you first have to understand why any of these private texts ended up in a courtroom in the first place. Phil Mickelson's text messages weren't leaked by some hacker or sold to a tabloid. They were subpoenaed. A federal judge told him to hand them over. And that only happens when the stakes are way higher than a celebrity scandal. It started in August 2022. Mickelson and 10 other players filed an antitrust lawsuit against the PGA Tour. Their claim? The tour was illegally blocking them from playing in LIV Golf events. They said the PGA Tour was running a monopoly. And when you file a lawsuit like that, the other side gets to demand evidence. That's called discovery. Both sides hand over emails, documents, and text messages. When the PGA Tour's lawyers asked the court to compel it, the judge agreed. Everything Mickelson had written about LIV Golf, about Saudi money, about player recruitment, all became court evidence. And here's the part most people don't realize about discovery. Once a judge signs that order, there is no picking and choosing. You can't hand over the convenient texts and delete the rest. Every message, every timestamp, every photo attached to a thread becomes part of the legal record. There is no editing your own history once the court gets involved. These aren't rumors. They're legally compelled disclosures. And what they've revealed is just the beginning. Because the most damaging text in this entire case wasn't about money or lawsuits. It was about what happened one night in New Jersey. And the woman who witnessed it kept a recording. That woman's name is Ashley Perez. She was 27, married to Pat Perez, a PGA Tour player who had known Mickelson since childhood. The Perezes were part of his inner circle. They trusted him. In 2015, during the Barclays tournament at Liberty National in New Jersey, Mickelson invited the couple to stay at his private villa on the property. They were guests, sleeping under his roof. One night, the three of them were drinking together. At some point, Pat excused himself to use the bathroom. He was gone for maybe a minute or two. That's all it took. According to Ashley, the moment Pat left the room, Mickelson pulled out his phone. He showed her a photograph of himself, fully nude, visibly erect. Then he told her, and these are her exact words, "Tonight I'm going to leave my bedroom door open, and after Pat falls asleep, I want you to come to me." This was in Mickelson's own home, his guest's wife, almost 20 years younger. The wife of a man he'd known since childhood, and he made this move the second that man stepped out. Ashley later said Mickelson had been sending her good morning texts for weeks before that night. Innocent little messages, friendly, normal. Looking back, she said, "That absolutely felt like I was being groomed." He was systematically building trust, lowering her guard. When Pat came back, Ashley told him immediately. He didn't confront Mickelson right there. He waited, but eventually, he called to demand an explanation, and Ashley recorded that entire phone call, 26 minutes. On that recording, Pat repeatedly asks Mickelson what he did. Mickelson apologizes over and over while claiming he doesn't remember the details. At one point, Pat says, "You showed Ashley a naked picture of yourself." And Mickelson's response was, "You mean a shirtless picture?" A shirtless picture. Pat was talking about a full nude photo, with an erection. And Mickelson responded like he'd been accused of taking his shirt off at the pool. The recording makes it impossible to claim this is a misunderstanding. In 2022, Pat appeared on a podcast, My hatred for Phil is different than most people's. Phil crossed a line that you cannot cross. There's no coming back from that. That 26-minute phone call changed everything between them. But Ashley wasn't the only woman Phil was allegedly doing this to. Far from it. According to multiple sources interviewed by golf journalist Alan Shipnuck, Mickelson had a specific system. He'd walk into the pro shop at whatever club he was visiting, hand a young employee $500 in cash, and hand over his car keys. That employee would drive Mickelson's car around the course for 3 or 4 hours. Why? Amy was tracking his phone location. She'd see his car moving and think he was playing around. But Mickelson wasn't on the course. He was somewhere else, meeting other women. One source told Shipnuck everyone at the club knew what was going on. Staff drove his car in circles while he slipped away. This wasn't impulsive. This was a budgeted, planned operation. He paid people to help him execute it. He bought an alibi with $500 bills. Eventually, Amy found out, and she took action. The Farms Golf Club in San Diego was his home course. In 2026, he was accused of making non-consensual and inappropriate physical contact with a female employee. The club investigated and asked him to leave. His team claimed he decided to leave on his own. Multiple sources confirmed the club initiated it. Then Madison Club in La Quinta. Mickelson had an apartment there. Women had been seen coming and going when Amy wasn't around. After she found out, she called the club through their wealth management team. We need Phil's house sold. Now, Phil will no longer be a member at Madison Club. She called through wealth management. Formal, calculated, final. At the Bridges in Rancho Santa Fe, Mickelson's honorary membership was quietly transferred to Xander Schauffele. Another club, another quiet cut. So let's pause. A 6-time major champion accused of showing a nude photo to his friend's wife, asking her to come to his bedroom, and when confronted, pretending he didn't remember. A man who paid employees to drive his car so his wife's tracker would show him somewhere he wasn't. A man whose own wife demanded his membership be revoked. And if you think the PGA Tour didn't know what was happening under their nose, you're about to find out exactly who else was protecting him. Pat had known Phil since they were kids. Same circles, friends for decades. They came up through the same junior golf pipelines in Southern California, played the same junior events, chased the same college scholarships. By the time both turned pro, they'd already spent more than half their lives in each other's orbit. When Pat joined LIV Golf, they were on the same team. Supposed to be allies, but everything changed after that villa. Pat didn't just lose a friend. He lost someone he trusted completely. And he made it clear this wasn't about golf or LIV versus the PGA Tour. This was personal. What everyone understood was that the line was Ashley. What Mickelson did to his wife while Pat was a guest in his home. The nude photo, the proposition, the weeks of grooming texts. Ashley walked away with a recording that would become the most damaging evidence against Phil. She carried that recording for years, didn't go to the media, didn't try to sell her story. She just kept it, knowing if she ever needed proof, she had it. When Alan Shipnuck started investigating, Ashley was one of 19 sources who spoke to him. 19 separate people willing to go on the record. Ashley represents every woman in golf who was told to stay quiet. Who thought, he's Phil Mickelson, who's going to believe me? But Ashley spoke to Shipnuck, let him listen to that recording, told the truth. But Ashley's story might have stayed buried if one man hadn't spent months tracking down 19 different sources. Alan Shipnuck has covered golf for decades, written books about Tiger Woods, about the history of the game, and in 2026 he published his most important work yet. 19 people who knew Mickelson, worked with him, or witnessed his behavior. Club employees, players, people who'd been in the same rooms when things went wrong. What he found was a pattern stretching back years. Ashley was just one example. And 19 sources willing to talk tells you how much golf's culture has shifted. In the past, these stories would have stayed buried. But the LIV Golf War broke the old alliances, made enemies out of former allies. And the silence broke. When the investigation dropped, the golf world was shocked. Not because people didn't believe it, but because it confirmed what so many had suspected. And when the story dropped, it wasn't just the public that reacted. Phil's own wife was already making moves of her own. Amy had been married to Phil since 1996. 3 children. She'd stood by him through the early years, the family tragedies, the wins and losses. She was the one holding the umbrella at Augusta while he chased Jack Nicklaus's record. She was the name he thanked first in every major victory speech. But when she found out, she didn't hesitate, didn't protect him, didn't make excuses. She made a phone call, Not to a lawyer, not to a publicist, to the club. That's a wife who is done, methodical, shutting down every part of his life he'd built outside their marriage. The marriage was over, and it wasn't the media that announced it. It was Amy, through the cold language of a wealth management firm. When the wife pulls the plug, there's no spinning it. No, we're working through our issues. No, taking time apart. Phil was done, not just in his marriage, in the game, in the world that had worshipped him. But while all this was happening in Phil's personal life, a much bigger legal war was unfolding around him, and that's where the texts really matter. The antitrust lawsuit is still ongoing. Discovery is still happening. More texts are coming, more emails, more phone records. The court ordered all 11 players to hand over their messages, and those messages contain business secrets, LIV recruitment, Saudi money, PGA Tour policies, and whether they were legal. If those texts show what plaintiffs suspect, the PGA Tour is in serious trouble, billions in damages. A complete restructuring of professional golf, and at the center is Phil's phone, the same phone with the nude photo, the grooming texts, the messages about paying employees to drive his car. That phone is now evidence in a case that could bring down professional golf's entire structure. Nobody saw it coming. And if that case goes sideways, the PGA Tour doesn't just lose a lawsuit, it loses its entire business model. This isn't just about Phil. This is about the culture that let him get away with it for so long. Golf has always protected its stars. The sport looks the other way when its biggest names misbehave. Why? They make money. They sell tickets. And the sport is afraid of losing that. For 30 years, the PGA Tour built its brand around a handful of marketable faces. Mickelson was one of those faces. His smile sold sponsors. His left-handed flop shots sold highlight reels. And as long as the revenue kept flowing, nobody in a position of power had any incentive to ask uncomfortable questions about what happened after the 18th green. But the LIV war changed everything. It created fractures nobody could fix. And once those fractures appeared, the silence broke. People who would have protected him had no reason to anymore. People who'd kept quiet felt safe to speak. The old alliances were gone, and the truth came out. That's why this matters. It's not just what Mickelson did. It's why nobody stopped him. It's the system that protected him. And now the question isn't whether Phil can recover. It's whether the sport can survive this exposure. So where does that leave him? In 2026, he missed the Masters, missed the PGA Championship, failed to qualify for the US Open, withdrew from the Open. For the first time in 36 years, he missed all 4 majors in a single season. 36 years. That's not a slump. That's the end of a career. 3 clubs cut ties. The Farms, Madison Club, the Bridges. His honorary membership transferred. His apartment sold. The club where he was a fixture for decades asked him to leave. His response? He denied some claims, admitted past mistakes for others, tried to spin it as a witch hunt. But the evidence was too strong. 19 sources. The recording, Ashley's testimony, Pat's testimony, the tracker scheme. There was no spinning this. But the real question isn't whether Phil's career is over. It's whether the PGA Tour itself can survive the fallout from what his texts might reveal. The lawsuit is ongoing. More texts are coming. Every new one changes everything. Could the texts show the PGA Tour was colluding to block LIV? Yes. That they violated antitrust law? Yes. That leadership knew exactly what they were doing? Yes. If they show any of that, the PGA Tour is in trouble. Not reputationally. Legally, financially. The kind of lawsuit that could bankrupt the organization. And all of it rides on Phil's phone. The same phone with the nude photo, the grooming texts, the tracker scheme. That phone is now the single most important piece of evidence in professional golf. And nobody saw that coming. The next subpoena could drop any day, and whoever it names might be the one no one saw coming. The lawsuit continues. More texts will surface, more players implicated, more secrets revealed, and Phil Mickelson's legacy will be decided not by his 6 major championships, but by what was on his phone when the court came knocking. His career was built on being the smiling family man, the guy who waved to the crowd and signed autographs. But when the texts were subpoenaed, that smile was gone, and what was underneath changed the sport forever. Because Phil's phone didn't just contain his secrets, it contained the PGA Tour's secrets too. And when they both came out, neither of them could survive the collision. We're watching the fall of one of golf's greatest players and the potential collapse of the organization that runs the sport, all because of text messages a federal judge forced him to hand over. That's why this matters. Not just to see a celebrity fall, but to understand how the entire system came crashing down. The system is still crashing. More revelations, more careers destroyed. And for every young player coming up through the junior ranks right now, watching this unfold, the lesson is blunt. The game doesn't protect you forever. The sponsors don't protect you forever. The moment the court orders your phone unlocked, every carefully built narrative dissolves. What's left is what was always there: the swing, the scorecard, and the truth. Phil Mickelson is just the first domino, and the next one could fall any day.